When the doctor came back from the lab, he was like, if you go home now, she won't last through the night. And if my mum just hadn't taken me to hospital to see if there's a pill that could slow the bleeding, she'd have woken me up for my exam and I would have been dead. If you've got ADHD or autism, you are more likely to have adenomyosis, endometriosis, PMDD. A lot of these conditions can go hand in hand with neurodivergence. So many women feel like they're not listened to. And just saying, now we have a right to speak up and be heard.
We've had such a great response to the podcast, and so many of you have been in touch asking what you can do to help. It's really simple. Just follow, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. That way we can reach more people, and that way we can celebrate these great minds that think differently. Marjolein Robertson has taken the comedy scene by storm. Known for her raw and relatable humour, Marjolein has earned high acclaim at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival and even secured a top spot on the List Hot 100. Her shows have won Fringe Awards and even a Neurodivergent Review Award, though in true ADHD style, she missed the email for that one. Just as a heads up, in this episode, we touch on some difficult topics, including mental health. Let's get into it. Let's see how great minds think differently. I've been reading a lot about you, listening to you, Marjolein, and I think you're brilliant. And I think what you do is you are a big risk taker. You have put yourself out there, right, on really personal things.
Yeah.
Tell me about your appetite for risk.
Now I've been diagnosed with ADHD, I might be like, it's that lack of self-awareness or self-preservation where you just throw yourself out there. But I also feel like life is about trying things and taking chances and putting yourself into situations. And I also feel like once you've done something like that or been through something like that, you carry a bit of knowledge that maybe you can share to other people that can help them.
I guess I'm just interested in the fact that doing comedy is a risk. No,
I agree. I think when it came to doing comedy, it was quite funny because I'd been working as a town planner. I had a very good, comfortable career, a very safe career. And I remember when I told my mum and dad I wanted to go for comedy, and they were just like, as long as you work at it, we'll support you. And they just have a strong work ethic. So I think they really supported me. They're so trusting. So for me with comedy, comedy didn't feel like a risk in the sense that I saved up for it. I thought about it for a long time and I maybe sat on my laurels almost too much till I was like chomping at the bit to go and dive into it. It kind of built up inside of me. And it was to the point where I was convinced I could live in Shetland 11 months of the year and scratch that itch for 1 month of the year. And it was actually a 2-star review I had in 2018, which was very fair and was like, shows promise, but just doesn't have the background yet, doesn't have the stagecraft yet, doesn't have the abilities yet to deal with everything.
Okay,
and I was
like a potential review.
And it was really nicely written where I'd done a show where I felt like it had been really bad. And the viewers were so fair because they weren't like awful. They were like, there's something there, but they just don't have the capabilities yet to bring a room up when it's quiet or change the pace or change the topic. And I was like, until I properly dive in head first and start the career properly, I'll never know if I can do it.
Yeah, that sounds quite constructive.
And I think talking about home as well, then I always knew I had home to go back to. So it's like, I'll go and do it. And if it goes wrong, I'll just go back to Shetland. And my idea was if I go to New York and I do it intensively and get some background in it, I can come to Shetland, come home and just start up an improv troupe.
What did you enjoy about it? What does improv do for you?
It's like when you're a bairn and you're on the playground and you just do imaginary play. And you make a world and a story. Maybe you're the X-Men. I think when I was in Amsterdam and thing went wrong after thing went wrong, every time I went to the improv workshop and you're in an imaginary world, it was just a safe place to play and have fun and completely leave all your troubles at the door.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's like a positive escape, isn't it?
Yeah. And it feels creative and fun and special because it'll never happen again.
Yes. So it's very of the moment in that sense.
Yeah.
And
It
so
can
then,
also be incredibly bad and unfunny.
yes, sure. It can go either way.
Oh my gosh, I've done some shows when you're like, I'm sorry, audience.
So there's quite an element of risk with that.
Yeah. It was funny because that's what the course in UCB did, was they had lots of rules. And there's rules to improv that if you follow them, you'll build a scene together. So yeah, when you set up your scene, something will happen. Somebody will say something odd, and it's just playing with that odd thing, because that's the twist where the jokes lie.
Yep.
But I also think you can get a bit too wrapped up in those rules and stifle creativity slightly. And that's what was nice, because I did that course, really grounded myself in those rules in America, and came back and started teaching pals improv in Shetland, and they were all so naturally funny that they kind of shook me off from me being so obsessed with the rules as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you like rules?
I don't know. Sometimes.
okay.
I don't know.
Put
How
you
do
on the
you
spot.
feel about rules?
Fucking back at you. I like rules when so the worst thing you could give me is a blank piece of paper. The worst brief is a do anything.
Oh.
Yeah. I love it when someone says, there's the sandpit, now go and play, because there's some order to that.
Okay,
or there's
yeah.
some conditions, some criteria, as a brief. So I like, it's sort of, I guess, some order, but some freedom, rather than you can do anything. Yeah, I need a sort of box to play in.
Like a direction.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I never thought about it that widely, because I often am like, I'm a law-abiding citizen, and then I start saying all the things that I think should be legal that I do anyway, and they're like, that's illegal. And I'm like, oh yeah.
That's just the right side of the law. But then I'm not a big fan but then I do like breaking rules. And I guess within that sandpit, it's about breaking rules,
I think
or challenging.
If I think a rule is like unethical or illogical, I'll have no qualms of breaking it.
Yes. Yeah. And what if you think there's a better way?
I would do the better way.
Yeah.
As long as it doesn't put people at risk.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because I think that's the most important thing.
Tell me about the mind reader.
You're so good. You're like a mind reader. So, yeah, one of the things I got involved in from 2014 and 15 and 16 was I played in the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo. Played fiddle. I was a civilian, but played fiddle. It was really lovely. Marjolein Robertson was asked to bring 40 fiddlers together, which is an iconic number for the survival of Shetland fiddle music.
Yeah.
So I would go and play, and we'd play every evening at the tattoo, but we'd have the days and late nights free. So I would just go and ingest as much comedy as I could. And me and my friend went to see a comedy show one day. We got our dates wrong, and we were at the room at the right time, but it was actually a mind reading show instead. And we're like, well, we don't have time to see another show because we've got time to see this, then we have to go get ready for the tattoo. So like, let's just go see a mind reader. It's the Fringe. And we went in, and there's a bowl at the front of the stage where you had to write a question and slip it into the bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And it was there the whole time.
Okay.
Just a glass bowl, like a goldfish bowl. I just wrote on this piece of paper, because I've always wanted to write this television show and make it, and I've always wanted to do comedy. And I just wrote on my piece of paper, like, what should I do comedy and TV as a career? Or I wrote something really vague, and I put it in the bowl. And at the end of the show, he did this thing where he took a few questions out, put them to his head, and read them. My favourite moment was when he put one to his head and went, this always happens. Somebody's drawn something, and he handed it to an audience member, like, are you okay to describe what you see in the paper? And she's like, it's a penis. It's like every time. But he was like, oh, before he did another one where he didn't even take out the bowl, he just put his hand around the bowl. He's like, I can read the questions just like this. And he's like, whoa, there's lots of career questions, so many career questions. What I want you to do is I want you to scream your career question with your brain at me. So I was like screaming in my head as loud as I could, like, should I do the career I want to do in the arts? And he's like, okay, someone's literally screaming. He's like, is female, she's in her 20s, she's a Taurus. And they're like, if that's you, stand up. And I was the only one to stand up. And he was like, oh my gosh, your name, I've never seen the like of it. It's like Marge. And I was like, because you don't even write your name on a piece of paper. It was mad. And I was like, and also me and my friend had just gone there by chance. I always thought that they researched you before these things.
Yeah, so there's no guest list.
No, and I was like, oh, it's Dutch. He's like, no, don't tell me. He's like, it's Marjolein. I was like, it's pronounced Marjolein. And he was like, yeah. He's like, you're embarrassed to write your question word for word, and you shouldn't be embarrassed. He's like, are you comfortable to tell us? And I was like, well, I just want to make a TV show and do comedy. And he's like, yeah, you will. You're in the right place. He's like, you're already at the Fringe, not for comedy, but you're here because you're interested. He said, you've had a really rough year last year. You weren't happy, you lost a lot, and you struggled, and you had the hardest year you've ever had. And it's affected you, but you're coming out of it now. And it's like, now's the time to act. You've got a notebook at home from uni, but you kept writing ideas for shows and jokes in the back of it. Go home, open that notebook, and start writing. And it was just wild, because when I left, and it was so wild. And the whole time he was like kind of attractive, and I was like, don't think about how hot he is. Don't think about how attractive he is. He'll hear you. Also, don't think about everything wrong you've ever done, because he'll see that.
And so what did you do?
So I went home, and that's when I signed up for the comedy course. That's when I went to New York. And then that Christmas, it's funny, it's one of those things I didn't even do immediately. Probably ADHD. But that Christmas I went back and looked at the books, and I was like, oh, I have all these funny anecdotes from uni that I wrote down. So I just applied to the Free Fringe that January, February. And I did my first Fringe the following year.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
That's such a great story.
Yeah, a mind reader told me to do it.
Exactly.
You know when comedians are like cynical and they're like, there's nothing magical. And I'm like, everything is magic.
Yeah.
Like everything.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about your ADHD.
Yes.
Tell me about your ADHD diagnosis journey.
I was diagnosed in September 21.
Okay.
A lockdown diagnosis.
Yes.
Lots of us were. So one of my best friends, Roseanne, was doing her diagnosis. She publicly speaks about this herself. She's a poet and an author.
Okay.
So she talks about this in public realms as well. I'm not doxing someone who's a private person. But she was just like, Roseanne said, as she's filling out the form for every question, she's like, I just thought of you. So I looked into it, and I was like, oh, this kind of does relate to me. And in lockdown, because I just started comedy before lockdown for a year. So basically because it's lockdown and I wasn't spending any money, but I was making money after not making money for a year, I thought, I think I have this, and I'm in the privileged position where I could pay for an assessment. So I just went private and paid for one.
And what did you know about ADHD prior to this?
Prior to that summer, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I had that same ill-conceived idea that it was just the 7-year-old boy who couldn't stay in a seat in the classroom.
Yep. That stereotype.
That like hyper running around, can't sit still.
Yep. And
thinking that was what it was.
What do you now know?
How much time do we have?
We've got time.
I mean, do we even know how much time we have? Because we've got ADHD. Like, we have no concept of time. When people ask me how I see time, I'm like, you know those Salvador Dali paintings with the clocks?
Yeah.
I'm like, good die. I hate time. The concept makes no sense. If I was to look at it this way, I think for me, the biggest part of the diagnosis was how it changed how I judged myself. Because I was one of those people where I always had several jobs at the same time, and I would always do multiple activities and work with clubs and the podcast and all these things. And I'd always be like, every day, be like, I have to get up, have a good breakfast, exercise, go to work, come home. Oh, but go to the film club, but also finish that idea for a script I have, but also finish editing that podcast episode, which I rarely did. Phone my sister and paint that wall. And I'd get home and I'd do nothing but paint the wall, and I'd be painting the wall till 2:30 in the morning thinking, why is it so late and I'm still up? And then I'd go to bed, and every night I'd feel like a failure for not having done everything on a list that actually now I understand was impossible for one day. And then the other days when I would burn out and I just lie like on the couch, not even turn on the telly, just lie on the couch on my phone. Like I'd be like, I'm going to have a nice day, I'll have a nice breakfast, watch a couple of episodes and go for a walk. And I'd just be on my phone for like 5 hours on the couch. And I didn't realize I was burnt out. I just thought I was being a waste of space.
Yep.
So actually understanding that I find it hard to judge time and how much is possible in a day. And also in my days, I need to have breaks and cool down time. And just understanding more about how, understanding it's okay not to be able to judge what you do, and also your self-worth doesn't rely on your achievements every day.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just went to bed every night being mad at myself for what I considered underachieving, and also for being mad at myself for going to bed so late and only getting another 5 hours sleep. Just how I
Which
think
just
about
creates a
myself.
vicious cycle, right?
Yeah. So it's like that, how I look at myself has changed.
Do you feel kinder to yourself now?
Big time. Big
And
time.
how do you manage your ADHD?
I took medication for the first year, and I want to rewrite this because I've not rewritten these jokes yet, because I still talk on stage about taking medication, but I don't take it anymore.
Okay.
I was on lisdexamfetamine at 30 mils, and it wasn't enough, so they bumped me up to 50. But then I started to rapidly lose weight because I couldn't eat on it. So I lost like over a stone in a month.
Okay.
But like to the point where...
As a side effect?
Yeah. Just because also I'm really bad at eating anyway. So I would have a massive breakfast before I took the pill, because once I'd taken it, I couldn't really eat. And then I'd have a massive supper. But even then, it wouldn't have been enough calories in the day for me.
Yeah. And
So
how was your mood? How were you
I got...
on medication versus off?
I think I really struggled because because my energy was so low. Also, I would often forget to take it early enough, and it would affect my sleep at night.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the thing was, I would concentrate really well. And it was that weird balance of being like, oh no, if I give up, what's going to happen to my workload?
Yep.
So I went back down to 30. And it was halfway through the Fringe in 23 when I was doing the show Marge. And I was having a really good Fringe. My show was doing really well. I was halfway through the run. And the Fringe, if you know about comedy, like the Fringe for me is... my whole year revolves around August. Because for 25 days in a row, you just do your hour show every single day. And you also do spots at other shows. All the comedians are in the same bit of the city. All industry are there, and reviewers. It's the whole year for me revolves around that 1 month of the year.
Wow.
1 month of the year for August. It's a huge time. And to be honest, in 23, my show did well, and it helped my career. Halfway through that Fringe, I was like, I don't need these anymore. I set them down and never picked them up again, and just came off the meds like that. And I then stopped drinking alcohol. And I started every day with like a walk or an exercise, even if I only walk for 10 minutes, just outside and inside again. And I think that has been a huge shift. I drink now, but only on occasion and a fraction of what I used to drink.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think alcohol was a massive burden with ADHD, even for the fact, just like if you have a big night drinking and you're a bit groggy, if you lose your rhythm of how you do day to day, that can be quite a setback for myself.
Yeah. So I'm interested in the fact that you were diagnosed, in 2021?
Yes.
And your career has taken off, right?
Yeah.
Like that simple?
Yeah.
Tell me about being ADHD and being a comedian. I
always think it's like the perfect career for ADHD. Just before we start recording this podcast, my phone alarm went off because it's wake up time for me at 10 a.m. And you're like, what? 5 hours after you wake up? There's a lot as a comedian where you have so much free reign over your time. Because sometimes it's nuts. I do the job I've always, like, this is my dream job. And I'm like, oh, I have to go and work for 20 minutes.
I've never thought about it like that. But
it's so funny because you're just in the flat having a cup of tea and you're like, oh, I'm going to have to get dressed and go on the train and go do this gig where I have for 20 minutes on stage and make everyone laugh and hang out in the green room with my pals.
Oh, it's so dreadful.
I think it really helps. I think a huge part as well is the judgment part, because we can talk about the fact that you tend to work in the evening. So now I've rescheduled my day. So like morning is nice walk, come home, nice breakfast, watch something. And I treat my morning like my evening. So my morning is my time of reflection, quiet, telly.
Love that.
And then when lunch hits, it's writing and admin. And then the evenings is gigging.
Okay.
So that's how I've kind of restructured it. But then when I'm doing a spell of writing and no gigs, I just rearrange it so morning and afternoon is writing and admin, evening is off.
So when you write a 20-minute bit of work, what's your process on then performing that, like testing it, performing it? What do you do?
Well, this is why I think it's kind of interesting with the ADHD diagnosis, because the way I start writing is really important that there's no judgment, because I think, and that's
From you
yeah,
on your work.
yes. Sorry, I don't know if this really answers your question.
No, keep going.
Okay.
Yeah,
You know,
let's
the ADHD
go
thing,
with
like,
it.
I have a point I want to say, and I have to say this point for my brain will let me think about another point. That thing
Go
was
with
like, I'm
it.
going back 3 questions. Sorry, just think about in my diagnosis, did you get all the questions when they're like, do you struggle in conversations to move on? And I was like, well, yeah, because I have to tell my story from 3 points ago, so then I'll bring that back up. And she's like, so repeating yourself. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, I do all of that. Because it's in your head. But when I go to write, I write in a style that I find online, because when I got into comedy, a lot of people will write a few jokes and go do a 5. But I got into comedy by doing fringes before 5s, because I would...
What's a 5?
Oh, sorry. So your 5 is, comedians will start by writing a tight 5, which is just a 5-minute set of jokes.
Okay.
So that'll be it's called their tight 5. So they'll like craft a perfect 5, which kind of kicks off with a good joke, introduces themselves, is just like joke, fast, has a few callbacks. And then when you start doing comedy, so to become a comedian, you have to get into all the clubs. And to get into all the clubs, you have to start at the bottom of the ladder in each club. Because anyone can call themselves a comedian.
Sure.
The way the industry regulates is by each comedy club watching the individuals climb up the ladder in their own venue.
Okay.
So that's why you'll go to a open mic night with lots of new people trying a 5, or established comedians trying new material. So you'll go do a 5 at that, and the club will watch you, and then they might say, come back to the open mic night and do a 10. So go and do a 10 at that.
Okay, so it's time-based.
Yeah, then they'll say, come on a Wednesday and do 5. And if you do well, they'll say, come on a Thursday and do 10.
Okay.
And then once you've done that, they might be like, okay, you can try a Friday. And they slowly build you up. And then you'll do 15, and then you'll do 20. But that takes years. And you do that in every single club.
Okay. What's been your best gig?
My favourite shows are hour-long shows. But I think that's because I got into comedy a bit backwards. So I used to do this thing that I found online. I can't remember where, but it's called vertical or horizontal writing. And the idea is that when you start the writing process, it's like what you call like a blank page, and you just write vertically. So you maybe think of a story where you got a surprise, because any surprise or twist is essentially a joke. Or maybe your opinions on something, because comedians love saying their opinions on things. So you write vertically as much down the page as you can. So say I was writing a story about, I'm trying to think of something that we mentioned earlier on that's funny, the mind reader. So I went to a mind reader and he surprised me, and I just tried to write that as a routine.
Yep.
I would write as much as I could. So I'd write the story, but then I might go on a segue, because I might remember my friend I went to the show with and something funny about them. Or I might write about the fact that we were trying to see a comedy show and we got lost at the Fringe.
But is that being distracted and ADHD and going off on a tangent, or is that comedic principles?
When I first read this, it says comedic principles. But the whole idea is when you write this vertically.
Check me out, sounding like I know the terminology of comedic principles.
I don't know the
and
terminology.
And it being played back to me. Thank you.
I was just acting like, I was like, yes, that sounds really clever. I'll go with that. But yeah, so the idea is, you just write as much as you can down the page. And the idea as well is that you let yourself go on tangents, because that's a creative flow.
Okay.
It's almost like doing your pages in the
Which is why ADHD and comedy is, natural, lovely fit.
And then you set those pages aside for days, and then you come at them horizontally. And that's the first time you ever look at them with an editorial mind.
Okay.
Because your mind that creates and your mind that like edits are almost conflicting, because creative needs no negative thoughts so it can flow freely. But then you do need to come at it a later day with the critique.
This is like the origins of Pixar. I don't know if you know much about Pixar's origins. They used to have, in simplistic terms, a group of realists, a group of dreamers, and a group of critics. And the dreamers would start the story, and then it would get passed to the realists, then it would get passed to the critics, then it would get passed from the critics back to the dreamers.
That's amazing.
Isn't it?
That makes so much sense.
It's so good when you can... when you can only focus on one element. And obviously it depends what kind of person you are. But it just made me think of that. You sort of going, you leave it for a few days, then you come back, then you look at it through a more critical lens.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's fun, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's essentially doing that, but with yourselves.
Yeah. On your own.
I wonder if I should add in a realist stage. Maybe that's why it's surreal. I used to call myself an observational comedian, and the first reviews all came through and called me surreal, and I was like, oh, so the world doesn't look like that. I thought everyone thought about it that way.
Being assessed and knowing your ADHD, do you think that makes you a better comedian?
Yes.
Why?
Well, I think being assessed knowing I have ADHD has helped me with everything in life. Like even relationships and the dangers of like limerence or trusting people too quickly and things like that. And even just my own health, like making sure I sleep and exercise and eat. So then I think it's helped with every aspect of my life. And also like taking time for friends and knowing that I can have object permanence, I can even relate to people. And then all of that back on myself for that whole like thinking I'm worthless or a failure. Like, so it's helped in every regard. So I think naturally that way it's helped with stand-up. But then I also think the interesting thing of ADHD is on the stage is the one time when I have control of time. Some comedy clubs might say different. Some texts might be like, Marjolein, you missed a flash. But like when you're on stage, you have to be so strict with the time. If you've got 10 minutes, you have to do 10 minutes.
Okay.
You can do like 9 minutes 45 or 9 minutes 30 or like 10 minutes 15 seconds. But if everyone overruns, then it's bad. It's like everyone has to stick to their time. And on stage is like the only time where I have control over time. So you start your set like, oh, I think this is a 10-minute set, or like this is a 20-minute set. And you start your 20-minute set and someone in the audience speaks to you. So you talk to them, goes off in a segue, you throw in other jokes you weren't even planning to do because you start having a back and forth. But then I'm done that and I'm like, well, that was like a minute. So that means I've got 1 minute less to play with. So I need to take out a joke. But if I take out that joke, that means that callback at the end won't work. So I'll actually skip over that bit, miss that bit and change that bit. Or maybe I'll take out that whole section, this mini section, and the callback will still work to the first bit. And your brain's going on so many, and at the same time you're remembering to like make the audience laugh and smile and be in the moment. At the same time your brain's like rearranging time and words and jokes and the structure of your entire set. And it's like the only time that works for me.
How does it feel when people don't laugh at your joke?
It's horrible. It's called dying.
Dying.
It's death.
I know. Marcus Brigstock talked about this.
It's awful.
I've had a death.
It's bad. I actually had a conversation with comedians about this. I don't know if this is too grim for the podcast.
Grim away.
Do you know the kill yourself voice?
No.
The voice in your head that goes, kill yourself, kill yourself, kill yourself. Now, this is where this comes from, which is really dark.
I know a version of that voice. It's not a voice that says, kill yourself, kill yourself, kill yourself.
So I've talked to people and a number of comedians who've all said, yes, the kill yourself voice. And I've talked to other people and they've been like, what? And they talk about the voice, which is like, I want the ground to swallow me up.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh, is the language we use about death on stage subconsciously damaging us so that we equate awkwardness and like shame and people not laughing and you doing a bad job and being embarrassed to death? And I'm just like, is that why it's such a grim terminology we use in our brains? And now when that voice happens in my head, I'm like, I'm like, no, kill the part of you that feels shame. And that really helped. That got rid of that voice.
Yeah.
But I was like, I think it was a terminology because you're like, I died or I'm going to die on stage. This is going to be a death. I had a death last night.
Yeah.
And it's like such like grim wording that we use.
It's so extreme.
I know. And I talk to so many comedians and they're like, yeah, the kill yourself voice when you feel awkward or like embarrassed. And I'm like, yeah, we really need to check in on that.
Yeah, we really need to change that.
Yeah, because when I actually isolated that voice and I was like, why is it saying that? It's like, oh, just because I want the ground to swallow me up.
Yes.
It's that feeling.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, maybe that's too dark.
No. I think it's we've had a few comedians on. You are that same theme of that language. It seems to be incredibly prevalent and like damaging.
Yeah. That's why it's like, I don't know.
For what it is, which is someone didn't laugh at your joke, guys. That's it.
We're so needy.
That's
We're
it.
so needy. Comedians are
You
needy.
didn't get a laugh.
I am.
Get on with it. No?
Yes, it is, because I'm like the happiest I've been. I'm the most content. I think happy is an emotion and happy comes
Sure.
and goes.
Sure.
Content is what we should strive for.
Agree. That's lovely to hear you say that. Not that I know you discontent or unhappy, but from what you're saying about going to bed and thinking, I'm a failure and I didn't do this, and giving yourself a hard time and beating yourself up and having all these deaths and all the rest of it, to then, saying things like, well, I'm the most content I've been. That's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I sometimes think we don't stop and think about it.
Yeah.
And I had that feeling for the first time after this Fringe in September. Because the 23 show, which is going to be online soon, I'm just going to release it for free so people can see it, because I want them to see it, because it deals with a subject matter I'd like people to see.
Yeah, which we're going to talk about now.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
So to write that show, I went to therapy, which sounds weird, but I just couldn't understand why it started in the first place in my life. So I went to a therapist, and the therapist was like, you can't understand because you don't understand, and you never will, because it shouldn't have started. And that's about the abusive relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, no one deserves to be treated that way. There's no reason anyone gets abused. And just take comfort in the fact you don't understand that, because it means you don't have the mind of an abuser.
So this was a relationship. This was, if I can paraphrase, you were in an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
And you went on to do a show about that relationship.
Yes. So that was partner. But I don't want to like ever like even date stamp when that relationship happened or any details about it.
Sure.
But it was in the past.
Yep.
It's not now.
Why did you decide to do a show about it?
There's something about writing stand-up that makes you look at something from another lens and try and understand it. And I wanted to tell the story, but when I was trying to tell it, I still felt like I was to blame. Like I was properly gaslit, and I really have a problem when people use the term gaslit lightly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when people like get told one lie and then they use the phrase gaslighting, and I think that's doing disservice is maybe the wrong word, but it's really dampening down how
minimizes.
bad. Yeah, that's right. Because it's like I, for years, couldn't even understand. Like it was like when it would be happening, I would actually feel dizzy, like I was swimming. Like I couldn't tell where the ground was because I just didn't know what was real or what wasn't real, but I just felt like I was to blame. Like it's so confusing.
And you told that story through folklore.
Yes.
Why did you decide to do that?
Genuinely, it was because when I do previews for a show, you do lots of previews as you're getting ready for the Fringe, like work in progress is like half price. You just work on jokes on stage. And because I like stories mostly, a lot of it's storytelling and the jokes going last. And I kept chickening out of telling the story about this relationship. I kept being scared to do it.
Okay.
And I went to one preview and I was like, I'm going to bring it up straight away. I'm going to get into the nitty gritty really early doors. Obviously, I'll do a few jokes first. So I did some jokes, got into the crux of the story and did the story and pushed myself to do it. And then I realised that I told it all and we'd 15 minutes left. And I just told like a harrowing story to an audience about what had happened to me. And then there's 15 minutes left. And I was like, ooh, why don't I lighten the mood by telling you a folktale?
Okay.
So I told the Selkie story. And as I was telling it on stage, it's a small room, there's 30 people in. I'd been chatting with the audience throughout the show because we'd been like, because it's a work in progress, it's really informal. I don't normally talk to audiences in shows, but in work in progress, I do. And then I told the Selkie story. And after I stood back, I was like, that's just like imagery for what I just said, isn't it? And they're like, yes, Marjolein, that's exactly the same story. So then I was like, oh, rather than saying the horrible bits and spelling out for the audience, I can use this folktale to explain what happened to me in a way in which it's not, because especially when you talk about like a long running relationship where you got chipped away gradually, it's like you feel like you have to say every incident for it to have weight, which you shouldn't have to do.
No.
But it's like if you said one incident, people might be like,
one's enough.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
It was just strange. So and then I stitched that into the show. And then I was like, yeah, because folktales weren't just for entertainment. They were for protection and knowledge
Sure.
and safety.
Yeah.
So that's how it's stitched in. That's why I like work in progress. That's like I work on stage when my brain is going
Yeah,
a
when
million
it's
miles.
live.
Yeah.
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 When you're literally joining dots in the moment.
But yeah, so to write that show, I started seeing a therapist. And I also did shadow work where you like just write down the things about you where you get triggered or upset easily, or the things about you feel shamed about, or the things about you want to better about yourself, like maybe some of the opinions you have or how you react to things or bad habits that you want to change. So I wrote that all down, went to therapy, did that show, and then I gave up drinking for a few months, came off my medication. But even then, I think the show had a long-standing effect that even after I finished it, I knew it was going to go on tour. And the tour for that show, Marge, about the abusive relationship, I purposefully made the last date Shetland because I knew all my friends and family would be coming. And a lot of them didn't even know this about me. And I knew after I did in Shetland, I would be like, I can't do it again. That's going to be hard.
Yeah.
So I did 2 dates in Shetland, and the last one was the one where like all my family was in. So I was like, I'm after I put it down here, I'm never doing it again. I filmed it before
Sure.
that. So this September 24, I found my notebook of all the notes I made before I wrote Marge, of me like looking at myself and my behaviours and my actions and my thoughts and my habits, and how I felt about myself back in February 23. And that's when I think the feeling of contentment came in, because I thought, oh, with a lot of it, I'm on the right path, or I feel like I am there. And when I looked at my old self, I thought I kind of look at her with disgust, but I just felt really sorry that I wrote about myself so horribly.
Yeah.
And that's when I was like, oh, I feel good. I feel content.
Yeah, because you can see the difference.
Yeah.
And then let's talk about O.
Okay.
So I
Sorry,
know...
I don't know if that made sense what I just said.
It did make sense.
Okay, good.
It made total sense. And I think what I'm struck with is the slight irony in you going on this sort of discovery, healing, therapeutic journey, which is one big journey, and bringing your career and comedy into that as a way of healing, I think is really amazing.
Well, Marge was meant to happen in 22, and I didn't do it. I just wrote about ADHD. But what I felt with the ADHD show was a number of people left saying, I'm going to try to get diagnosed. One thing that made me cry was this man said, thank you for your show. I have a granddaughter of ADHD, and I always was just like, why can't she behave? And now I realised that she feels strongly, and she doesn't, and she's not being naughty. She's just expressing herself, and you help me understand my granddaughter. And that was like, oh. And I was like, if Marge can help people the way that the ADHD show helped people, I want to do that. And then that's what triggered me then to write O as well.
Yeah.
To help people in a different way.
So it's such a cool... You won an award for the ADHD show, didn't you?
I was nominated for award for the ADHD show, and then nominated for 2 for Marge.
Yeah.
Yes.
You didn't turn up to the ADHD show.
I didn't turn up to the awards, that's right. I've not attended any awards I've ever been nominated for because I keep forgetting. I've missed every award ceremony I've been nominated for. It's so bad. I've turned up at an award ceremony I wasn't nominated for. I've done that. But I forgot to turn up 3 times I've been nominated. 4?
And
4 times I've been nominated and haven't turned up to the awards. Because I got nominated this year, yeah.
Brilliant.
Hopefully if I get nominated next year and I turn up, I win. But it's not about the awards. That's another reason I feel content now, because I'm like...
There you go. Exactly, you're in a different place.
I had a feeling where it's like creativity is just given to us of how we share it, and we're sharing other people's stories. We're just finding a voice for them.
Yep.
So it's about everyone. It's not about the ego.
Yep.
So awards is about the ego, and that seems to fly in complete contradiction of where creativity comes from in the first place. Sorry.
That's
what I had yesterday.
Don't worry. Let's briefly touch on O.
Yeah.
Because I know you are, it's another one where you have a topic that's very personal to you, that you feel very strongly about, that isn't talked about enough, that is taboo or just not, repressed kind of people in this country not talking about it. Tell me what O was about and what it means to you and why you feel it's so important to share.
Marge was about the mind, and that's talking about losing oneself in an abusive relationship and about the recovery. O goes to the body, and it's about a condition I've had and my fight for a diagnosis and what to do next. And they each have a corresponding tale from Shetland. So when I was 16, I had a period that was so bad, it got worse and worse and worse and worse. But we didn't really talk about it or talk about it graphically.
Mm-hmm.
My mom just noticed me going through all these toiletries really fast, and she's like, something's wrong here. So she booked me into the GPs, but it's the night for my higher English exam, which is my most important exam for school. And Mom was like, I don't want to let you go to sleep. There's something not right here. I'm going to take you to casualty. Maybe they can give you a pill to slow the bleeding, but we'll still go to the doctors after your exam. So Mom drove me into casualty, and I didn't want to go. I was tired. All I could think about was my exam. But I went with her just because I was afraid that I'd bleed through my trousers in the exam and that'd be embarrassing. We got to hospital, and the doctors asked me what was wrong, and I burst out crying and said I was on my period and it wasn't good. And they're like, oh, okay. And they took my blood test, and they were still lovely. Like, I just think because I was like, I'm having a period. And they're like, okay, welcome to casualty. That's the right place to come when you're on your period. When they took a sample of my blood, and then when the doctor came back from the lab, he was like, we need to prep a room. We need to get blood transfusions, get her a wheelchair. And my mom was like, what's happening? And my mom wanted to take me home. She's like, she got an English exam.
Sure.
We'll come back tomorrow, but we need to go home tonight. And the doctor's like, if you go home now, she won't last through the night. And if my mom just hadn't taken me to hospital to see if there's a pill that could slow the bleeding, it's horrible. She would have woken me up for my exam, and I would have been dead. Like, that's horrible for my mom and dad. Like, it's that mad thing that when you're a teenager, you feel indestructible. Like, I still feel immortal because you're that young way where you're like, nothing's going to go wrong. But it breaks my heart thinking for my mom and dad, that's a nightmare. And just also that, like a period.
Sure. Yeah.
I was kept in hospital for 3 days. I was being monitored. They were trying to get the bleeding to stop. They're trying to make sure that my blood was increasing. So that was what happened. And the diagnosis came 14 years later.
You laugh, but... You laugh, but... What did you have to do? Tell me what you had to do to get the diagnosis.
Yeah, because they just put me on the pill.
Yep.
But they put me on such a heavy dosage, like the injection pill, that I just stopped having periods. So like, well, if you're not bleeding, you're fine. And I was like, but something's wrong.
Yeah.
And then my friends, when I was 30, were like, tell them you're trying for a baby. Because they all noticed when they started trying for babies, or my friend who's endometriosis was like, when I said I want to have a baby, that's when they paid attention. So I just went to the doctors and I lied, and I was like, I'm trying to have a baby. And at this point, my bleeding was back again, and it was bad. It was really bad. And I was like fainting, and I couldn't work, and I'd be lying in bed for days just bleeding. So I said I was trying for a baby, and that's when they actually gave me my first ever internal scan, like 14 years after I almost died.
You are sadly not the only first woman who, whether it's with a chronic condition or is trying to, or is neurodivergent, trying to get an assessment, where the medical world has let them down. Can you just talk a bit about that?
Yeah, because I feel so many women don't feel heard in a doctor's, or are made to think that they're just too sensitive to pain, when we know it's actually the opposite, or just like bury down their own issues. And so many times as well, especially when it's something like with menstrual health, you're often put onto some form of contraception which just masks whatever's going on. So I felt like that was, for me, a struggle. And that's why as well I wanted to write O, because I wanted to write O for raising awareness of this condition with mental health, but also for the fact that so many women feel like they're not listened to. And just saying, now we have a right to speak up and be heard. And also I think recognising the feelings in your body is really important, and having that space to feel and describe it. And often for some reason that's not listened to, when that's a huge indicator of something going on.
Yeah, and we hear the exact same with females being misdiagnosed bipolar personality disorder as just depression or anxiety. Up until 2008 was the year we still believed that it was boys, and you got to your 16th birthday, and then the next day the ADHD disappeared.
That's incredible.
And the diagnosis is what?
Adenomyosis.
Adenomyosis. How common is it?
I think it's more common. Same way with ADHD, when they're like, only this many people have it. I think adenomyosis is more common because essentially what it is when you're lining, and normally of shows I'm very secretive about the subject matter of the show, and I don't want to give information so people learn it in the show. For this, I think it's more important that people hear about this condition because it might help them.
Yes.
But essentially the lining stitches right through the wall of the uterus and into the muscle. It needn't happen every time you have a period, but it can. So to shed your lining, rather than just having small contractions, your muscles need to tear open, shed the lining, and then you can hemorrhage from the inside.
Yeah.
So when you see those Always adverts or those tampon adverts when they're like hiking and running up a mountain and swimming, I shouldn't do that.
Yes.
I actually need to take peace.
Yes.
Yeah.
And is there any correlation ADHD-wise?
Yes. Have you heard about this? I think if you've got ADHD or autism, you are more likely to have, they believe, adenomyosis, endometriosis, PMDD. A lot of these conditions can go hand in hand with neurodivergence. Adenomyosis is one of those things that when you have like, oh, my period's so painful and so heavy and I'm so weak, it's like, that's not normal.
Yes.
You could have adenomyosis. When I wrote O, I first went onto the NHS website and it said affected women over 40. A month before the Fringe started, the NHS website to change to their 30s. And I'm like, come on.
Okay.
You're getting closer, but you're still way off.
Because so important. And tell me about the reaction of men to your show.
Yeah, the show so far to date has had 9 fainters and 18 walkouts. 9
fainters and 18 walkouts.
4 walkouts have just been in the bit of the show when I just say the word hysterectomy. And they'd be like, no, and just left.
No.
And there's warnings everywhere. So on the website, when you went to buy tickets, it was like, speaks about bodies and gore and blood. It is graphic. And if you turned up on the day, the staff on the door were like, just so you know, there's talk of injections, body gore, there's blood. And people are like, yeah, but still with all those warnings.
Fainting.
Yeah.
You're not even showing pictures.
No, but sometimes they would faint on the word injection, or it'd just be, so I was like, this is coming, please be prepared. Because my fear would be somebody would stand up and fall and hurt themselves.
Sure.
My biggest fear is
people are not listening properly for the whole thing and not getting the information in.
My other fear is somebody would be sick. Because if someone is sick, I'd be like, oh, then it'd be just a hellish room.
Yes. I think both Marge and O and the ADHD one, like, incredibly important. What's next?
So next year I'm finishing the trilogy, and it's a show about the spirit. And I think there's a few folk tales that would work with it, but I think I know which one I'm going to tell. And it's another Shetland magical folk tale that I think talks about the journey of life. But it's really funny because
I hope it's funny.
The last one is going to start with the idea that we're not our thoughts, we observe them in our memories. And it's funny because as I'm writing it, I'm trying to decide what I think the spirit is.
Okay.
It's a bit weird. Like, for example, was a really weird end for a Fringe show, because a Fringe show needs a nice conclusion. People want an answer.
Sure.
And I had to end that show by saying, what do I do now to manage adenomyosis? I don't know.
Yeah.
And I realise that's frustrating for you as an audience, but that's my life.
Yeah.
So so next year I'm going to look at the spirit, but I think the spirit's going to combine Marge and O in the sense that you kind of also are the journey you've had in life.
Sure.
And
Don't
these
forget ADHD.
aspects. Oh no, so that it's all going to tie into one big thing.
Well, I can't wait and bring on the trilogy. I know the name of it and I'm not going to say it. So just making sure I don't say it.
Imagine I called it Cart.
Yeah, there you go.
That would be funny. But yeah, I'm really excited because I love doing O at the Fringe, but it's nice to be able to do it again. So I'll be touring it in February and March all around the UK.
Okay.
Around Scotland and England. And
can I get a free ticket?
You actually can.
No,
I'll get you a ticket.
Okay, I'd love a ticket.
Yeah, just you have to remind me. You know what it's like? You need to message me like, can I have a free ticket for this date? And then I'll forward it to Lily and she'll make sure it happens.
Shit, maybe I should put a reminder in my phone to send you oh my God, no, let's not do that. Tell me what item you brought. What item did you bring for us that represents your brain?
It is a container of homemade smoothie. Every day I use a blender and make a smoothie with at least 4 or 5 fruit and veg and protein powder.
Me too.
Do you do the same?
Every day.
Yes.
Every day, without fail.
Yes.
Every day.
Oh, that's so lovely. Yeah, because sometimes I'll forget to have a meal, or I need to know that I've had fruit and veg in the day. So this is a really easy way of making sure I get my vitamins in. And I take it with me because I know that I'll run around London and at some point I'm like, I haven't eaten in 6 hours. I always have to have this on me. This is I'm going to forget to have a meal. And this is a way that I look after myself in a really friendly fashion. And you can make it the night before.
Yeah.
So you did the same.
You can make 2. You can make it the night before.
Stockpile.
Yeah, I've got one in my bag out there.
Really?
Yeah.
I still have to have this in my bag, my smoothie, because I will forget to have a whole meal or 2 a day.
Yep. What I love about your brain is you've done a load of work on yourself, which is really important. You've taken responsibility for your brain, your body, your life. And that sounds really obvious, but not everybody does that. You've done loads of work for yourself. You've managed to create the environments in which you flourish. And you've brought in so much of you into your work, which sounds really obvious again, but not a lot of people do. And you've made it a success. And then you've made it really simple for yourself in terms of, diet, exercise, even changing your day round so that you get your evenings, but they're in the mornings. It's just, it's really good.
Thank you. This has been like the most affirming podcast.
No, I just like sleep, diet, exercise, all those, are such core basics that with different brains like ours, we forget, we don't prioritize, whatever. Yet they're absolutely core and absolutely fundamental to them being able to do all the other stuff.
And also like cutting out the things that give you an immediate fix, but actually long-term bad effects, like alcohol. That was one. That is like, I was using that to shut my brain off. Yeah.
It's just simplifying things.
I think we live in a good time now as well, though, where you can say, even especially in the comedy world, we're like, are you having a drink? And you're like, no, I'm not drinking. And it's not weird at all.
Yeah.
Whereas I think like maybe 10 years ago, people were like, come on, have a pint. Now people are like, oh, good on you.
Yeah.
Like, and it's just like, just that easiness of it means I feel like, I'm really lucky to be involved in everything at this stage in time.
Yeah, it's good. Then you can be more present.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Your questions were really lovely.
Oh.
And you made me look at some things and we were like, oh, that's nice. So thank you. Thanks for having me on.